Blood shaking, everybody. Welcome to the brand new Orange Bloods Recruiting Hour. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That is Chad Hastings. And all we're doing is talking recruiting. Yes, there's an NFL playoff game going on right now, but that's not what we're focused on. We're jumping straight into the meat, a little bit of potatoes, maybe even some dessert, but we're not even messing with the appetizers today. Do us a solid. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, get notifications. We're creeping up on 18,400. Yay! Mr. Hastings, welcome back. I feel like I haven't seen you in 3 hours.
I know, it's been a long time. Hey, it's been a long time.
Sorry, I'm interrupting you as usual.
Feels normal. Now we're in. Now we're good. Now we're getting ready to go. All I know, Catch, is when this chat comes in, things must be going well. What Bama player are we poaching today? Sandman is ready. Yeah.
Feeling themselves a little bit. We may actually have an answer to that question, Sandman. Stay tuned. Jason Suchomel is going to join us in less than 20 minutes. But before we do that, Blake, tell them what time it is.
Round fight. Get over here. Finish him.
By the way, in case folks were wondering if they maybe were watching House Divided earlier today, I had apparently watched that intro twice with Walter Nolan in the Ole Miss uniform and didn't even realize it. So Blake, the super producer, had snuck that in there and was waiting for me to see it. It is portal combat to start because recruiting and portal and coaching moves, it all goes together. And Catch, it starts with some visits from this past weekend. One of them a former Alabama Crimson Tide team member, one of them a former Beaver out at Oregon State. Which one you want to hit first?
Let's start with Silas Bolden, just because I think the former wide receiver at Oregon State, that is really fascinating to me because I got to be honest. And Silas, if you're out there, by the way, cute girlfriend, if you're watching, I thought when Isaiah Bond jumped into the portal, because I've been told all along that Texas kind of looking for two receivers in the portal window. And then it was like, I thought, well, they've given up on getting the big bad mamma jamma, AKA a guy like Isaiah Bolden. And I thought, Bond. Boy, that's going to be tricky. Bond and Bolden together. I thought when Bond jumped into the portal, that might be it for Bolden, that the moment he jumps in the portal, Sark goes straight to Atlanta, Georgia to recruit that guy, to get him into Austin, and then he's in. And I checked in with Silas before he left, and I was like, hey, everything's still cool? What time you getting in, right? He's like, oh, I'm getting in on Saturday. And I thought, oh, wow, okay, well, they haven't canceled the visit. But then Bolden has this visit, and he comes out of it, and I reached out to him yesterday, and he was like, Texas is my number one. I asked him, are you still going to take visits? So I don't know, man. I'm still kind of figuring that out. But right now, Texas is the team to beat. Suchomel calls him up and interviews him. And he tells him the same thing. And maybe even goes a step further. He really goes into how much he enjoyed the Texas visit. We'll talk to Suchomel in about 15 minutes because I think he's been communicating with Bolden today. Okay. I think they're going to get that kid. I think Silas Bolden's been on social media all day, talking to Texas fans. His girlfriend's been tweeting things. I wondered if they would cancel his visit. I wondered where his reps would be if he came aboard and they had then they had Bond and they had Golden, and then you throw in Cook and Wingo and DeAndre Moore and Ryan Niblett. It's like, man, where are they going to get all these guys some reps now that they pulled a couple of guys in through the portal? And Texas hasn't slowed down. It sounds like they absolutely want this kid. Now, he's electric, man. I compared him to former Texas Longhorns wide receiver Tony Jones last week.
Yeah.
It's a dated reference. You kind of had to be there.
you might have missed it because it did go quickly. It moved very quickly.
It was 35 years ago-ish, 36. Like, God, I'm dating myself that like Tony Jones. But once upon a time, Texas had this 5'7" wide receiver, and he was kind of a badass. And this guy's got some Tony Jones in him. And if you could get a Tony Jones on your football team, trust me, kids, go to YouTube. I think he might have some video on there. You'd have him on your team 10 times out of 10 times. Like, really good football player. And maybe this is a case of Texas just thinking, we don't turn around football players that are this good. But he looks like a guy that, look, he could certainly come in, I think, and fill some of the Keelan Robinson void, Chad. But he's more capable than that. We're talking about a guy that was one of the better wide receivers in the Pac-12 last year, one of the better players on the Oregon State team. He's really good. USC's talking to him. He could go visit. Arizona and Washington are schools that he's kind of looking at, but some weird stuff's been going on at Washington and Arizona. And I don't know that.
Really? Do tell.
So it's not as easy as, well, I'm going to go where I thought 7 days ago I might go once I entered the portal. Some things have happened. Arizona doesn't even have a coach yet. So I don't know. Like, it doesn't completely make a lot of sense to me because I don't quite know where a guy who played all the time last year at Oregon State is going to quite get all of his game reps. But there's no question that you put him on this Texas team today, he's an incredibly good player. He's really good. He's showing signs that he really wants to go to Texas. In fact, I don't want to give away any of – y'all don't tell Suchomel that I said this out loud, but because I don't want to ruin his thunder when he comes aboard. But he mentioned that he was talking to Bolden earlier and asked him about Kendrick Blackshire and whether or not he thought Blackshire was going to go to Texas. And Silas told him, I hope he does. Which, I don't want to say this kid's a bad poker player, but he's rooting for guys who otherwise might not be his teammates to go to Texas. So I think there's a very real chance that this kid ends up at Texas. Texas's cup will be overflowing at that point with guys that I think can make plays in the 2024 season. But I think that's where we start. That's nothing but good news. And quite frankly, if Isaiah Bond doesn't happen this weekend, I feel like the Silas Bolden conversation would have been our lead. Everybody would have been thinking to themselves, what's up? Because this guy, we need him. We need receivers. And it feels a little bit different today. But Texas put the all-in pitch on that young man. And he certainly didn't come out of the visit saying, I just don't know where they're going to play me. It sounds like they made a great pitch. It sounds like he had a fantastic visit. He brought his girlfriend with him. They looked like they had a great time together.
Yeah. It does say something that he brought her.
Yeah.
I would think.
And I'm telling you, they're both on social media, maybe as we're talking, showing their pictures from the visit and just, he was teasing earlier with Texas fans, like, should I hook him? Like, I think he's got the itch. And Texas, of all the teams that he's looking at, is more settled, is coming out of the playoff, isn't going through a coaching change. We'll see what happens. But right now, things surprisingly look really good there.
And just kind of an update where we were talking about this earlier on House Divided, but in the fluid situation of portal, coaching changes and all that, earlier, I know you had gotten info that Silas was thinking about Texas, Arizona, Washington, USC. I think that was the order of visits he might be taking. Obviously, two of those other three are now going through coaching changes. So,
and the USC visit was going to be at the end of the month.
Okay.
So,
at this at this point, do we know for sure? Well, first off, was there any visit before Texas of note? Was there anything he did before Texas that was a big deal?
Texas is the first.
Okay. So then now it'll be interesting to watch. Do you still go to those two places? If you go to Arizona right now, who are you talking to? If you go to Washington right now, are you going to be talking to it's ironic because you would have been talking to Jed Fish in one of them. Now you're talking to Jed Fish in purple and gold in his new version. So how does all that work for Silas?
A Washington team, though, that doesn't even have a quarterback at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Could they use some wide receivers at Washington? Yes.
Yeah, and that's the other part, Catch. If you're one of those guys that catches the football, what is laid out in front of you when you walk in to talk to Steve Sarkisian and that crew about what's in store, man, it is all there to see, right? They can show you film if they want, they can diagram stuff if you want. They'll talk about Ewers, then they'll talk about Ewers leading you right into Arch Manning the next 2, 3, 4 years, if you like, or maybe you can do 5 still at that point. Could be full of a lot of good offense if you're a receiver.
Yeah, and look, this is a guy that caught 54 passes at Oregon State this year, 746 yards, 5 touchdowns. They used him in the run game. He's had over 20 carries in his career out of the wide receiver position. He's really good. And I need to check, but I think from an eligibility standpoint, let me look him up real quick. I thought, he only caught 3 passes as a redshirt freshman.
Mm-hmm.
But let's see how many games he played there real quick. In 2021, hold on, come on, it's loading for me.
After you get there, we got a super chat that's come in from Ben that's asking a question specifically about Bolden.
So he's got 1 season of eligibility left at this point because he played in 2021, 2022, and 2023. He redshirted in 2020, and even though that's a freebie year, it's not a freebie year if you've redshirted. So technically he's got 2 years left to play 1. So he would be a senior this year for the Longhorns. I thought that was the case, but I wanted to double check.
Gotcha. Okay, so Ben throws in our first super chat of today's show, $2. Is he a super blue portal guy?
I think he's borderline. It depends. You know what, Ben? It depends. Are we going by production? Because as a producing college football player, I would say yes. If we're going on NFL talent, are we making our list based on guys that we think are going to play absolutely at the next level? Then no. Because if he was an NFL level talent, I think he could have easily have gone to the NFL after the year that he just did. But he's a 5'7" wide receiver, and those guys have limited value at the next level. There are occasional spots for guys with that kind of size, but man, it's really hard. And so I think it makes a lot of sense that he would try to play 1 more year of college football. He's only had 1 big season. He had the big year at Oregon State this year, modest numbers as a sophomore. So I don't know. Again, I'm a little surprised that he's in the picture, but I think it speaks to Steve Sarkisian not wanting to turn away guys that improve your roster, and he absolutely does. There's just no doubt about it. Now, Chad, let's move on to the other guy that was visiting this weekend. Kendrick Blackshire, the Alabama linebacker.
Ben, thank you for that. And we'll get another offensive question in here in a second. But yeah, so Kendrick Blackshire was in the linebacker number 40 for Alabama. What are we hearing on him?
I think we could have a decision made during the show or before the end of the day or the next 24, 48 hours. He visited Ole Miss. He visited Texas. I think it's between those 2 schools. And really now it just comes down to him quickly making a decision. At Alabama, they've already started up coursework last week. Not that that's that big of a deal, but this is a guy that had already started his spring semester. I think there's a real sense of urgency, like we saw with Isaiah Bond, that these guys want to get their stuff taken care of and get ready for the next season. So, let's see what happens there. But, I don't know. It's hard. It's a hard one to call. You could make the case that they sold him the idea this weekend that he could absolutely be a starter at Texas. They're so light with upper class proven guys. I think Ole Miss has to have without even going to be honest. I didn't look up at the Ole Miss depth chart to completely see what their linebacker position looked like. Maybe I should. Maybe I will when Suchomel comes on. I'll just take a peek. But I can't imagine Ole Miss being in better shape in terms of needing guys. So I think there may be a greater need there for Texas, which isn't completely dissimilar from what I think might happen in the pursuit of Stanford tight end, the Urasek kid, Ben Urasek.
Mm-hmm.
He visited Georgia this weekend. They're freaking loaded at tight end. I saw that and I was like, well, maybe he just wants to go play for Georgia. Can't begrudge a dude if he said, I got 1 year left and I can go play in Athens, Georgia for a year. I mean, there are worse life choices that one can make, but he's going to visit Texas this week. If we're talking about a Texas depth chart versus a Georgia depth chart, that's advantage Texas. So I think we may have seen the Texas – and look, I think Texas kicked the tires on the Alabama tight end that's announced yesterday that he's entering the portal. In a world where I just don't live in a world where there are a lot of accidents, the announcement that Yursik's going to visit now makes a lot of sense. Black was the guy that came in. Catherine says on the tight end front, who would be the best get, Urasek or Black or both? I don't think you need both. I think, although you could make a case because Black's got more eligibility, Urasek would come in as a grad transfer with 1 season left and 1 season only. Tight end will be a need for this Texas team next year as well. They do have to start filling in the blanks a little bit. I don't know how realistic of a shot Black is for Texas. I heard some things yesterday that made me think he's not going to be the guy. And Urasek comes up today as a guy coming into Texas. I think Urasek helps them in 2024 the most. He's a guy with over 100 career catches, 1,300 yards receiving. Of all returning college tight ends across the country, he ranks in the top 5 in both career receptions and yardage. He's a proven guarantee on the box of a really solid player. Let's interrupt this conversation, Chad, because he's taking a break from watching the NFL playoffs to talk a little recruiting with us. Yeah, we may ask Chad about Ross Bjork in a little bit, kind of recruiting related. But Jason Suchomel from OrangeBloods.com joins us to talk a little recruiting. Thank you, Jason. I don't
embarrassed to be wearing this shirt. Yeah.
I don't know that I would be as good of a person as you are or being with us today.
I've got my 16-year-old daughter sitting beside me in her TJ Watt jersey too, so she's probably not too happy with me either. But that's
she's like, "What is this? Pausing the game?"
Yeah, she goes, "What is there to talk about?" She goes, "The Longhorns football season's over." No, honey, it's all recruiting never ends. So
yeah, that's right.
Jason, we'll get to you on some Junior Day stuff here in a second if we have time. But we really began today's show talking about the portal. It continues to kind of dominate the recruiting discussion with 2 guys having come in this weekend, Silas Bolden and Kendrick Blackshire. The news that Texas is going to be bringing in Urasek, the Stanford tight end, and just, Jabbar Muhammad. And there's just been a lot of stuff to talk about. Obviously, Isaiah Bond. Let's start with Blackshire and Bolden. I know you've had a chance to talk to Bolden. What's your vibe on both of those recruitments as things stand?
Yeah. I talked to Bolden on Sunday. He was actually waiting at the airport. His flight had been delayed. This is Silas Bolden, of course, the Oregon State wide receiver transfer. And boy, he couldn't have been more positive about the visit. Just said how great the program is. He loved the coaches, loved hanging out with the guys. Interestingly, he's supposed to follow that visit up with Arizona and Washington. well, you got kind of a little coaching carousel going on there, right? So, Arizona's coach goes to Washington. So he says, I don't think I'm going to visit Arizona. Now I don't even know if I'm going to visit Washington. And he was pretty open, not pretty open, he was very open. He said, hey, Texas is my leader coming out of the weekend. So I actually texted with him today, just to kind of follow up on some things. And, the language hasn't changed. I think Texas is in a really good spot there. My question is, the staff clearly wants him. So if they continue to push for that commitment, I think Texas probably gets Silas Bolden. Kendrick Blackshire, he's a little bit tougher one to read. Former Duncanville standout linebacker. I reached out to him today, and he's been kind of, off and on in terms of communication with me, but he has not been communicating with anybody, I don't think, since since the Texas visit. He'd visited Ole Miss previously. I kind of kicked the tires with some Ole Miss people today, and they don't really have a great read on him either. I talked to people that spent some time with him on his Texas visit, and they said, yeah, it looked like he had a great time. He was just speaking very highly of everything. But, I think it's still Texas and Ole Miss there. I don't have a great read on which way that's trending. Interestingly, and Ole Miss's defensive coordinator today put out like a shark tweet, which I guess is his bat signal for a commitment, right? So Ole Miss people are trying to figure out who that is as we sit here and talk this out. They don't think it's Blackshire, but it's something to just kind of data point to file away. But, I just think, hey, if it comes into Texas and Ole Miss, Texas is the home team. They've done really well in Duncanville of late. So I like Texas's chances if I'm picking, but I don't have a great read on that one.
And just to make sure any Texas fan that doesn't know, as you head towards the SEC, the Land Sharks is the nickname of that defense. So it's not random. Right. That's why the Shark thing. Okay. He's not just a Shark Week guy. Right? He's not just a Shark Week fan. In terms of Blackshire, Jason, he's interesting to me. He's going to end up going from, let's say he ends up going from Bama to Texas. That would be going from one school that clearly stacks linebackers, and there's depth always all over the place, to a school that's going to need that wants to be stacking them a little differently maybe than they are. Any indication of what Kendrick is being told in terms of how he would fit in at Texas, where the coaches see him, where Kwiatkowski and the coaches see him fitting in?
He hasn't told me that directly, Chad, but he is a pure kind of more of an inside guy. The schemes nowadays are so fluid, if you will. Inside guys line up outside and things, but he's more of a thumper in the middle. And even going back to high school, I remember covering him as a high school recruit. As I look, he was 6'2", 245 in high school. And I'm not talking, he's not like a big Levon Kirkland type linebacker. This is a guy that was lean and ripped, 245 pounds, even in high school. He's not the most fluid guy in terms of, he's not DeMarvion Overshown, a guy that can, maybe necessarily cover sideline to sideline. But I think, playing inside the box in a traditional sense, I think he's could have a nice role there. And he's also been a really good special teams player for Alabama. So I think that would be a role too. But, I would say he's probably more just, I don't know if this is what he's been told. My opinion, he's more of a situational linebacker probably than he is a 3-down linebacker. But, he's a guy that brings some experience. As I said, he could also help on special teams.
Jason, I'm curious when talking to the Mississippi people, because I got to admit I came up blank on this when I brought it up earlier. Was there a sense for how badly they needed? Because I'm trying to figure out if one of these schools has – I think when we look at the tight end from Stanford, Urasich, like Texas can sell him a story that Georgia really can't. They're really weirdly loaded at tight end. It'd be like Texas bringing in a tight end last year and feeling like they've got two really good ones, and where would another guy come in and play? What about Ole Miss's linebacker situation? Did anybody say anything just about how badly Blackshire might be needed there?
No, and I didn't ask. I was just texting with them, like literally probably 10 minutes. I'm working on my 3-2-1 column as I kind of watch the game and do different things. So I was texting with them about 10 minutes before coming on the air with you. But, I can follow up. But I didn't ask that. But, you don't bring a guy in for an official visit if you don't clearly have a need. Although, I say Ole Miss is, like, I was looking at the transfer portal stuff today. Louisville's brought in the most transfer portal players in the country. A&M was way up there. Ole Miss was like third, I want to say, or something ridiculous. So they actually,
Jason, I'm looking at a 2024 depth chart for Ole Miss, and their top 4 linebackers are all seniors. 3 of them are transfers. So I think they've already been addressing that position in the portal. They got some transfers coming in for certain. I guess they could tell him, hey, if a guy's coming in as a transfer, he hasn't won anything yet. So it's not like necessarily they have returning starters, even if they've got a pack of guys.
Yeah, but depth. I mean, a lot of things go into play here. I mean, not necessarily with Blackshire, but in general, when you're talking transfer portal recruiting, and you got NIL stuff. Some guys want to get closer to home, but honestly, playing time in depth charts are so much more important to those guys than they are high school prospects. First, every high school prospect thinks he's the best thing since sliced bread, and he's going to come in and take everybody's job. These guys go to college for a year or two, they realize maybe that's not always the case. And when you're transferring, this is kind of like your last shot at it. So depth charts are hugely important. Obviously, Texas has a pretty open linebacker depth chart. They got some young players, but nobody that's proven. Nobody that's, Anthony Hill, of course, but, a lot of those young guys that they brought in last year's recruiting class are still very much unproven. So, Texas can certainly sell playing time to Kendrick Blackshire, maybe as much or more than Ole Miss. How much of a factor is it making? I don't have the answer to that just yet.
Jason, I want to get a Ryan Williams update from you. I'll always think of him as kind of that first thing after Saban's retirement was announced, the decommitment from the class of 25 guy, and then plans to visit to A&M, former receivers coaches there. But I know that Texas has an interest as well. What can you tell Texas fans about Ryan Williams?
First off, an amazing player. Yeah, the wide receiver, 5-star receiver, reclassified from 2025 to 2024. And I'm not sure, he might not be the best receiver in the country this year. He's that good as a guy that still basically should be a junior in high school. But, decommitted from Alabama. The early word when that happened, Chad, was that, okay, Alabama's out. He's really not going to consider them. Well, now they go get Kalen DeBoer, and now he's saying, okay, Alabama's still in play there. I think he's going to take an official visit there. In fact, now LSU is going to try to get him on campus for a visit. You mentioned he visited A&M last weekend. I hit up a couple A&M people. It's been pretty quiet coming out of that visit. They feel like A&M did a good job, but I don't think anybody truly feels maybe that A&M is kind of in that front grouping. He's going to visit Alabama and probably LSU, and then Texas gets him on the 27th for an official visit, the weekend of the 27th. And then Auburn gets him that first weekend of February. He's going to commit, I think it's February 9th is his birthday, I believe. And that's when he's going to make his final decision. Alabama's interesting. Excuse me, as we watch them as they kind of get back into play. Texas, anytime they get a guy on campus, this staff does a great job. So I think Texas has a chance to kind of swing for the fences and maybe hit it out of the park on that visit. But I think Auburn still is going to be really tricky and really tough to beat. His dad played there. There's a confidence level at Auburn even before he takes that visit. And remember, they'll get the last visit. I was talking to some Auburn people over the weekend, and they said, hey, yeah, they felt like Auburn was going to get him even, before the Saban stuff came out. So confidence level at Auburn is very high, but, Texas will have its chance when they get him in on the 27th.
Chad, one of the things I'd seen on Twitter yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, forgive me, the last 24, 48 hours, kind of a blur. Williams had done an interview after the A&M visit where he said, I'm just waiting for somebody to blow me away. And then he was like, so somebody blow me away. And I thought, well, that's a hell of a thing to say after you took the A&M visit. I guess they didn't blow you away.
Yeah, right. Context clues. Maybe they didn't do it. Yeah.
What he didn't say was, I was blown away this weekend. What he said was, I'm still waiting to be blown away. So if you're using that kind of language, you feel like everybody's got a bit of a fighting chance, other than maybe A&M, who may have shown him a good time this weekend. But like I said, language sometimes can mean everything. And when I read that, I thought, okay, well, it's bad news for the school that just visited, because I guess they didn't.
Well, and also, and as Jason's talking through it there, Catch, another thing that I'm thinking here, guys, if you are Ryan Williams and you're a little freaked out at first when Saban retires because your receivers coach has gone elsewhere and now Saban retires, hearing that DeBoer is the guy, a guy that that put together, an offense that ended up with the Heisman finalist and receivers that everybody knows, that might calm me back down, Jason, and get me thinking of, like you said, maybe we do go back to T-Town and give this group another chance. If I'm a receiver, I would think DeBoer calms me down a little bit.
Yeah, it's the same reason Texas is so attractive to receivers, right? Sark's reputation. If Alabama had hired a defensive-minded coach, I don't think Alabama's in the picture. Like I said, when he first decommitted, even Alabama people were like, man, I don't think he's going to give him a look anymore. But you hire a coach like Kalen DeBoer with his history and what he did at Washington. You mentioned the receivers they had there. It makes sense. I mean, listen, he's been in love with Alabama for a long, long time. So, it's not like it was a shaky commitment to begin with necessarily. So, I mean, there's a real draw to Alabama. There's a real draw to Auburn. A&M gets a visit. I don't want to say a courtesy visit, but his former recruiting coach at Alabama gets him to visit. Texas has been in his ear for a bit. Again, I think I'd probably put Texas probably second to Auburn right now, and the Alabama's kind of tough to where do you place them right now. But you're right; he's going to give them another visit with Kalen DeBoer's history. So, I'm not counting out Alabama was maybe 4 or 5 days ago. These things obviously can change in a hurry.
Yep. Yeah, that's what Bo Davis says. Things can change in a hurry. Matthew says, thanks for all the hard work, guys. Hook 'em. Thank you, Matthew, for the 1999 super chat. Real quick, before we go to Junior Day, 2-part question, Jason. One, probably should talk about the defensive tackle situation with Bo Davis leaving. It was obviously a big piece of discussion for us on Orange Blood. So Alex January, he's on campus, so maybe – there's not a whole lot to talk about there, but DeAndre Robinson, I haven't seen him officially do anything yet, but all signs point to him eventually asking for Texas to let him out of his letter of intent.
Yeah, absolutely. That was like my days are a blur. I think that was Saturday, right? Because I was driving to Kerrville when that came out.
Yeah.
And DeAndre is not talking to anybody, okay? But people close to him are saying, yeah, he wants out of his letter of intent. He was supposed to move to Austin over the weekend. He did not move to Austin. So he must be pretty confident that he's going to get out of that letter of intent. But, he's told other players in the Texas commitment class, yes, I'm asking out of my letter of intent. Has he officially submitted that request? I don't know. I mean, obviously it's been communicated. If we're hearing about it, then the Texas coaches are. But that's kind of a weird situation. If you're Texas, you want that kid in your program. Obviously, he's a really good player, but you can't. You don't want to kind of force him in there. And that's Sark is so much about just having a locker room and culture. A guy like that, if he's not happy and you're basically forcing him to come in, that can upset your culture. He could always transfer after a semester anyway. So I expect he will be let out of his letter of intent. Alex January, you mentioned. He had some nervous moments after the Bo Davis thing, but I talked to some people close to him, and the wording was, hey, they're just going to kind of put faith in Sark that he's going to hire the right guy, and, they'll reassess once that hire is made. But Alex January did move down to Austin over the weekend. The other one is Melvin Hills, the defensive lineman out of Louisiana. He was not an early enrollee, so he's got a lot of time to kind of process this. But, in talking to some sources around that one, it's, I'm not saying he's going to ask out of his letter of intent because it's totally undecided, but those discussions with Melvin and people close to him are ongoing about what does he want to do next. I think ultimately, I'm assuming Sark makes a good hire. I think Melvin Hills probably sticks in the class, but he's another one we'll be kind of watching and monitoring moving forward.
And Jason, with respect to your time and the fact that I want to let you get back to the game, the Junior Day, it's a little ways away, right? It's the weekend and it's only Monday. It used to be that these individual Junior Days felt like everything, and now it's kind of a data point along the way, right? So many of these kids have already been on campus before. They'll come on campus again. So from your perspectives, this weekend's Junior Day is on a scale of a 1 to 10, a what?
In terms of importance?
Yeah.
I think it's pretty important. Texas has got such momentum. Like you said, Ketch, the days of getting Junior Days and getting 12 commitments, that's never going to happen again. The last couple of years, Texas hasn't gained a commitment at these Junior Days, and people still get disappointed. And we always tell them, like,
I don't think they want them, Jason. They tell these kids, Take your time.
Yeah, this staff doesn't push for early commitments. Now, this year, I don't know, it might be a little bit different because they're on such a hot streak. If some of these guys, I mean, I'm looking at my list here, man. There's some big time players coming in for this junior day, and the list keeps growing. But a guy like Riley Pettyjohn from McKinney, if he wants to commit, or Kobe Sellers, Jonah Williams, if he's a maybe to make it in. Tiger Ryden, the running back out of DeSoto, Jordan Davison out of Mater Dei. If some of those dudes want to commit, Michael Fasusi, although no, Fasusi, actually, he's not coming now. He was a maybe. If one of those dudes wants to commit, they're going to take that commitment. Byron Washington out of DeSoto, Carterius Brown is a receiver. There's some, I tell you, the news that'll make Longhorn fans happy. Booby Feaster, everybody's favorite, Booby Feaster, announced today that he'll be at the junior day. Booby Feaster is a legend on Orange Bloods just because his name, first off, he's an awesome player. Secondly, he's an awesome kid, but he has an awesome name, right? Booby Feaster will be at that junior day this weekend. So, I think it's a big deal, but more like what you said, Ketch, it's more about kind of just laying the bricks of that foundation, right? That's what this junior day is. You get these guys down there, show them the facility, make them feel important. Most of the true action will start happening late in the spring or in the summer, but it'll be a productive weekend for Texas, and I expect they'll help themselves with a lot of these guys this weekend.
Jason, just one more from me. Back to the 24 class. You mentioned Ryan Williams being in that 24 group. He's going to make a decision, obviously, coming up February for signing day, which has become a little bit of a lull now on that second signing day. You also mentioned Robinson. If you're a Longhorn fan, maybe some nerves that day about, is Robinson ultimately going to be, out of the letter of intent? Anything else you'd tell a Texas fan today about class of 24? Is there a name that's blinking at you and one that you might expect, or one you'd tell Texas fans to hope for?
Not really, honestly. I wish I had a sexy answer for you, but Alex Foster was a defensive lineman that they brought in the last official visit weekend in December. They pushed for his commitment, and they, I thought Alex Foster was going to wind up at Texas, but he told me last week after the Bo Davis announcement, he said that pretty much does it for Texas. Might they be able to go find somebody, maybe a guy who's committed to Washington or Alabama or something, if just the right pieces fall in place, try to make a late run at him? It's possible. It's always possible, but nobody really is on the radar right now. Right now, it's kind of Ryan Williams or bust for that 2024 class, along with, as you said, trying to hang on to some of these guys who may be wavering in terms of their letter of intent a little bit.
Gotcha.
Jason, get out of here. I don't want your daughter to feel like I don't want her to hate us because y'all had to stop for 20 minutes. So go back.
Well, it might have been a blessing the way they were playing when I paused it. So
you're not getting
I turned off the chat.
Spoilers away. I'm not saying a word. Get the hell out of here before I do.
All right, guys, we'll see you.
Jason Suchomel, managing editor of OrangeBloods.com, recruiting editor at that. I hope he was able to get in and out. Now that he's gone, I thought for a second that I was going to feel like he's going to want to come back and just do the show with us because it looked like the Steelers were going to score a touchdown.
He'd have gone an hour.
Yeah, I thought he was want to do a 5-hour show, right? We'd be a good luck charm, but no, not so much. In fact, everybody that's everybody knows, everybody in the chat, everybody knows what's going on in that game. Poor Jason. He'll find out.
Yeah. It was funny. My wife and I are talking today. My wife, for those that don't know, I'm married to a Steelers fan. So she and her side of the family are pretty happy about what happened to the Cowboys yesterday. But her dad took a little shot at the Cowboys on social media, and she messaged him, "Hey, you might want to hang on until our game. Like, you might want to hold off a little bit on that smack talk." And they're not off to a great start in Orchard Park.
Isn't your daughter also a Steelers fan?
My daughter's a bit of a free agent. She supports all the teams that her parents support. She's a bit smitten with Trevor Lawrence, so she's kind of leaned towards Jacksonville. She's a total Swiftie, so now she's had to kind of turn her attention towards the Chiefs at times. So she's kind of all over the place.
Fair enough. I did see this super chat earlier that we didn't completely get to. Chad, is Bjork hitting the portal to Ohio State?
Yeah, Blake, from what I'm hearing, he's looking for a fan base that's a little more intense. The one in College Station wasn't focused enough for him. Wasn't
you guys
weird
don't
enough.
burn enough stuff.
Right. Like he needs a little more intensity. He feels like there's a little too much wholesomeness going on in College Station. He really wants an edge to things. He wants to feel like broken glass should be flying. So he might be headed to Columbus. But that's a crazy story, Catch. I mean, trying to find Mike Elko's trying to do a lot in College Station over the next whatever time period you want to pick as they head into a 16-team SEC with Texas and Oklahoma coming in. Man, just A&M is grabbing at any kind of foundation stuff they can, something that'll stay put. And now they're going to lose their AD once again. It's happened a few times these last few years. And once again, they'll have a coach whose AD did not hire him. And that's kind of what they've had the last couple of coaches. It's crazy.
I think Bjork's a dick.
Whoa.
Like my personal experience with him during that whole Mississippi tweet, right?
Yes.
Think about in the history of social media, right? Now we've got a big old sample size. The number of times that we've heard of an AD responding after a loss to something that somebody said on Twitter, it's a small list, right?
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yeah.
Can you even think of another example of that ever happening?
I mean, I'm trying to think of, I think the most we've ever seen up until that moment was like a player, maybe a player on a team got drawn into a tweet, and decided to fire back or whatever. But I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it when it happened.
From my experience of being inside of it, it felt like I was being used as, hey, let's forget about what happened on the field. First of all, I thought Bjork, the night he called me out, I thought has to be drinking. I have no proof of that, but it's like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night after a game. Why otherwise would he even do it?
Yeah.
And like, I don't know. There's just, I don't want to get that it even happened of all of the comments to bow up to a comment pointing out like Mississippi's racial image, and like to pretend like that they don't have, he clutched his pearls. And of all of the people, the Mississippi athletic director whose program had just gotten rid of a mascot because it was deemed to be racist. Yeah. Just always bugged me.
Yeah. To me, it reminded me of the Mike Gundy, I'm a man speech, because I've always believed that was a distraction. That was to distract everybody from what had just happened in a game. And I agree with you. Both the AD and then the Ole Miss fan base allowed it. The ones that got fired up, they allowed that to become something because I think they were all trying to distract from it. They were all trying to distract from what was actually happening on the field.
Anyway, to wrap up the show, not a fan. Not a fan.
Not a fan.
But it has nothing to do with him being at A&M. Let me tell you.
Right. That's what's ironic. People would think, oh, he just hates him because he's the A&M AD. Oh, no. It's deeper than that. In fact, it's an SEC connection from way back in the day. Go look it up.
Like part of the deal was like he ends up in I think whatever happened in 24 hours, it might have led him to have a clear mind. He went from kind of like, before there was a cancel culture, I was on the cusp of getting canceled, right? He then is like, oh, no big deal. Why don't we, he invited me to come to the Ole Miss campus and be like a guest speaker to their journalism department. And like that there might've been something from the story that we could all learn from that would be, then he just never called and like contacted again. So it went from you're the worst person in the world to you should just come on to Ole Miss as my guest and we'll make it a positive to like, yeah, that never happened. And now that I no longer have a Saturday night where I need to distract from a team losing, now I'll just forget that it ever happened. What my favorite moment.
Before we wrap up here, I did have something for you. Unless you had, I wanted to get one more recruiting question to you, kind of what we talked about with Jason. But is there something else you wanted to hit?
Well, I'm thinking about it. Not really. Like, I still think, look, we've got a show on Wednesday that we'll do that'll probably be more junior day centric. I think if I was going to reset everything, I would just say, keep an eye on Blackshire today. Like, when this is done, I'm probably going to just write up. I probably already should have done it, but I haven't. So I'll get the instant analysis ready. That's probably coin flippish. I think it's interesting that both sides of the media covering that recruitment right now don't have a great feel for it. I will say that Silas Bolden told Jason, I hope he comes to Texas, without knowing that like, most of the time when these guys are on visits and that something's going to happen, they tell guys. Yeah. And then, if Jason's talking to a Silas Bolden, a lot of times you can get a hint like, oh yeah, no, I think that might go Texas's way, right? You'll say something without specifically outright betraying somebody's confidence or whatever. More times than not, you'll get hints from these guys. It didn't sound like Silas Bolden knew what Kendrick Blackshire was going to do. My history, what I know about this industry is that sometimes, I think we even talked about this. I can't even remember what the other thing was, but sometimes a thing can be a sign and you just have to look for, sometimes there's something telling you what the answer is. And you just have to acknowledge, oh, he was telling me something. That made me think Ole Miss a little bit just because of the way it was kind of passed along. But that's me third hand. What do I know? I could be completely wrong. But it was my spidey senses took that as a bad sign as it relates to Texas getting Blackshire. And honestly, if Texas is only going to take one linebacker in the portal, only one, and who knows, maybe they'll take two, but I would rather hang out, see what happens with Nansen in the Arizona head coaching job, and I'm going after their all Pac-12 linebacker if Nansen doesn't get the Arizona job, which it looks like he's one of the top two candidates for that job. The players want Nansen, the coaches want, or the boosters at Arizona seem to want the San Jose State coach, whose name I had never freaking heard of until today. So we'll see what happens there, but we may be doing House Divided tomorrow. There's a whole new set of circumstances where maybe Texas is looking for a linebacker coach now and a D-line coach, because the Arizona job, it sounds like that thing may get wrapped up by the end of tonight or sometime tomorrow. It is not going to take long based on where that program is current. They already lost their star running back to the portal today. So I think by the time we do House Divided tomorrow, we're going to have answers for Nansen and maybe the direction that Texas goes in at the linebacker position. Because if they take Blackshire and then Arizona doesn't hire Nansen and they can get that linebacker, Manu, through the portal, to me, that's the guy to go get. He could legitimately be a Jalen Ford like-for-like transfer in a way that I don't think Blackshire is.
That could be huge. I was just going to ask you to talk about DeAndre Robinson for just another second in terms of what would be lost if he ultimately is allowed out of the letter of intent. We always talk about how tough it is to get a badass D tackle. Is he badass enough for you that you'd tell Texas fans, hey, that's a pretty big deal if they let him out of the letter of intent? It will need to be dealt with somewhere else.
Personally, I don't think he's that good.
Okay.
I think he's really good. I think all 4-star prospects are really good. I didn't quite view him as a super blue chip, a guy that's a national top 60, top 70 guy in the country that gives you math that's advantageous for guys turning into NFL prospects. So I think he's probably in the 4-star category that hits at a high rate 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5 times. So there's at least a 75% chance that that guy in 3 years from now isn't making an impact anywhere. But he does have a lot of upside. And if the 25% hits, it could be a 25% that hits at a high level. And maybe he's not just a drafted guy, but maybe he's better than that. I do think these things up. He's from out of state. Anytime you recruit out of state and a guy doesn't almost immediately start, there's always, I think, going to be concerns about, does a guy go to the portal, especially now in the portal age? It's harder to keep out-of-state guys. All you got to do is look at the last few recruiting classes. The first guys to leave are almost always out-of-state guys who aren't playing. Do I think DeAndre Robinson would have played this year? Maybe. But the Longhorns were already looking to get a couple of guys in the portal at that position. They did everything they could to keep Alfred Collins, Vernon Broughton. I don't know. I don't know how many snaps if he were on campus. Maybe 150, something like that. So maybe he's playing like 10 to 15% of the snaps. I don't know. I didn't freak out. I didn't think to myself, this guy's worthy of a section, and I need to talk about how big of a loss he is. I think he's something just short of that. But it's a little bit like the whole pregnancy thing, right? You can't be a little bit pregnant. You either are or you aren't. And if you're not, there are implications for that. When it comes to being a super blue chip player and being in the talent pool where the number is so much more advantageous than everything else, he's not in that group. He's not far away from it, but you know what they call guys who aren't quite in the super blue chip talent pool? Not in it.
They're not there.
They're just not in it. So,
yeah.
You end up seeing like a national top 100 guy oftentimes is closer to the national top 700 guy from a pure mathematical standpoint than he is to the number 70 guy. And that sounds wild. And I don't even know if I would believe it if I hadn't done years and years and years of annual research on how all of these guys perform in their careers. But no, I wouldn't freak out.
Okay.
And he might end up being a good player, but the math overwhelmingly suggests that in 3 years from now, we'll never remember that we had this conversation.
Okay, so as we wrap up the first recruiting show, let me just remind everybody, Catch, I'm looking at a calendar here. First Wednesday of February is February 7th. So that would be National Signing Day, correct?
Correct.
Feb 7th. That's what we're looking at, kids. So circle that one on your calendar if you like. And so we'll be talking a whole lot about 2024, what happens between now and February 7th. Catch, by February 7th, does Texas have a new D-line coach?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We'll be keeping track of that.
Oh, yeah. No, what? I think that's probably the next 7 days, maybe a lot less than that. But, I keep thinking this guy's got to be, if he's in college football, what's the holdup?
Right. Might be in the NFL.
In the NFL, and maybe he's got a game today. I don't know. But I sit tight. I think it'll either be tomorrow, sometime in the next few days.
Gotcha. All right. Anything else you got today? Or are we wrapping up?
No, I saw that somebody said that Jett Bush declared for the NFL draft, and I don't mean to laugh. It just kind of made me chuckle. I don't know if that even happened. I'm looking right now to see if there's anything on my timeline about it. No, we're good. Look, tomorrow, guys, we'll have a modcast same time this time tomorrow. The modcast will return. Me, Jason, Alex, the whole group will be here. Chad will have the crap bag tomorrow at 2. He was talking about the new lineup and the changes that we've made. But yeah, get used to us. We'll be back on Wednesday. We'll talk a lot of Texas Junior Day and whatever the news of the day are at that point. But yeah, I think we're good to wrap up for now.
Yeah, and remember, in case you have not heard about the new schedule, you're trying to keep it straight in your head. Like, subscribe, and get those notifications at Orange Bloods Live. All those things are free, and that way you'll know when a show is about to start. But it is going to be a lot of fun. The recruiting show here is going to be Mondays and Wednesdays at 4, the very latest, from Mr. Ketchum himself, from that guy right there, on everything that you need to know about recruits, portal stuff, coaching changes, and what does it mean, and how everything trickles down. We're going to be talking about it a lot this off season. So until 4 o'clock on Wednesday, the next recruiting show, shout out as always to Blake, the super producer, for all his great work. And your next Orange Bloods live show will be the old fashioned 9 a.m. tomorrow morning from Anwar. Just check out all the shows. Thanks for supporting us at Orange Bloods Live. Thanks to everybody in the Specs chat today. Remember, specsonline.com, Specs app might be a good idea because it's damn cold outside, depending on where you are today. Might want to get it delivered. Get some of that liquid refreshment delivered. Might be a good idea. Everybody stay safe. Everybody stay warm. This is Orange Bloods Live and the recruiting show